All right, very good. Well, welcome everyone. I am Erin Crisp. I currently serve as the Executive Director of the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center. We've been around for about a year and a half, and we support teacher apprenticeship work here in the state of Tennessee with our many EPP and school district partners from around the state. The Tennessee Department of Education and the University of Tennessee system partnered up about 2 years ago to launch the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center as a source of technical assistance and support for the growth of teacher apprenticeship work around the state. This webinar is also partially funded through some grant funding from Ascendium Education Group, so we will recognize them as one of our sponsors as well. And so we appreciate you all joining us today for this conversation. This is the third in a 4-part series on 7 strategies for supporting educator apprenticeship. And we collected these 7 strategies as we were working with EPP partners, educator prep provider partners over the last year and a half or so. We started collecting some of these strategies that we noticed could be really beneficial if we shared and scaled to build capacity among other EPP leaders who are also participating in teacher apprenticeship or residency work. A few more admits to make. People still coming in. Hello, welcome everyone. So we have some exciting guests today to share more from their perspectives. So we will dive right in and move forward with today's agenda. We're going to hear from Wilson Finch from CAEL, the Council for Adult and Experiential Education, and Kim Eckert from the Oxford Teachers College, who is actively engaged every day in teaching teacher apprentices. And then we will also have some resources to share and some opportunity for you to discuss in some smaller groups and ask questions of Wilson and Kim as well. So this is a list of the webinars that we have participated in so far. If you'd like to catch up on webinars 1 or 2, those recordings are on our website, growyourown.tennessee.edu. Ooh, Bianca, maybe put it in the chat. My mind went blank. Bianca's going to put the website in the chat, but the videos are there. Workshop 1 was on overcoming barriers to entry. So we find often that GPA, test scores, and transfer credit can serve as barriers to teacher apprentices at times. Webinar 2 was an intro to prior learning assessment and competency-based education. And then we're going a little bit deeper with those ideas here in webinar 3 as well, as kind of a follow-up. And then as a plug for webinar 4, our next and final on July 23rd, we will be talking about who are we missing with these teacher apprenticeship programs and with our traditional educator pathways, who is underserved, underrepresented. We want everyone who can be a great educator to be a part of the pathways that are available to become an educator. So in webinar 4, we will focus on that. So we are missing, I think, one of our guests has not been able to join us yet. So I'm just going to skip ahead in my presentation and we're going to go straight to Wilson's content because we're teachers and we can adjust on the fly. All right. So our first guest joining us today is Wilson Finch. We're so happy to have you here today, representing the Council for Adult and Experiential Education. Bianca's going to interview Wilson in just a second and introduce him. I'm going to take some notes while you all chat. And for folks who are listening, be sure to capture any questions you have for Wilson, and we'll have opportunities to chat with him in some breakout rooms toward the end. So Bianca, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Erin, and welcome, Wilson. We're so excited to have you here. Just for a brief background, Wilson joined CAEL in 2014. In 2020, he began overseeing CAEL's advising and program support, managing projects focused on credit for prior learning assessment and adult learners across multiple states. Wilson has also authored significant works on adult education and CPL. So we're thrilled to have him share his experience with us today. So welcome, Wilson. To begin with, the first question that I'll ask is, through your work at CAEL, why do you believe and what have you seen about prior learning assessment? or credit for prior learning? And why is it such an essential tool for supporting adult learners?
Sure. So thank you for having me and to talk a little bit around credit for prior learning, of which obviously teacher apprenticeships can be an integral part. CAEL's work in credit for prior learning began 50 years ago, was what we were founded to sort of be involved with. And in particular, we have maintained that sort of relationship with those sort of founding concepts, mostly because for many, many decades, it's been a proven mechanism for helping adult learners obtain their degrees more quickly and to finish them at a lower cost and at a greater speed and with higher completion rates. And so in particular, as we've done more and more research and had more and more conversations, giving the ability of an individual to obtain knowledge, skills, and abilities outside of a college classroom, but then to have that assessed for credit has a lot of benefits for someone who comes from a diverse background, who may have entered higher education in a way that we would have said atypically, but now is increasingly more the standard. Someone maybe who spent some time in higher education, left, and is coming back, has had substantial work experience or other types of experiences in their lives that may have equated to obtaining some new knowledge. And rather than asking that individual to start over and to say, we're going to treat you as if you were just out of high school, giving them the opportunity to demonstrate that knowledge and to reduce the time to degree. So if you're awarding a credit for a given course, it's another course that a student doesn't have to take, an adult does not have to take. So they save obviously time and money associated with that. It also makes them feel empowered and valued, as if the experiences they are bringing to the table have some substantial quality to them. And the other thing is that we find, I think mostly because of this sort of psychological boost, but also just getting them through their program more quickly, is that they complete at higher rates. Adult learners don't primarily identify themselves as students. They identify themselves as whatever job they're in and maybe as a parent and other things in their lives. And so making it flexible and effective and reflective of their backgrounds is particularly important for adult learners and addresses their unique needs. It's not the only tool, obviously, to helping adult learners complete their degrees quickly, but it's one that has substantial benefits. And what we have found is that for any type of credit for prior learning, the graduation rate is doubled. And if you exclude military credit, which is the most common in terms of credits awarded, it actually is tripled in terms of the graduation rates for those individuals, which is very powerful to see across all student demographics and from different institutions as well. And so seeing the power of that and something that's been reaffirmed in research is something that we think is a particularly useful intervention and also makes it more relevant to the sort of career pathways that the individual is pursuing as well.
That's great. So I'm hearing a lot of benefits associated with saving students time, saving them money, higher completion rates. From an institutional perspective, how does the implementation of PLA translate into higher tuition revenues? That's a question that we get a lot from our partnering EPPs. And could you speak to what are some of the financial benefits that universities can expect when they adopt expanded PLA opportunities to students?
Sure. So a very fair question. You may be thinking, well, if students are saving money and they're getting credit for these courses, that's less tuition revenue. And also, I think conversely, a lot of people become concerned that the individual is missing interactions with faculty members. There's less demand for faculty members' time, other concerns as well. And these are reasonable questions. But actually, what we have found through our own research in particular is that individuals who earn any sort of credit for prior learning or prior learning assessment credit, on average, take about 17 to 18 more credits. These are tuition-bearing faculty-taught courses, not their PLA credits, than their non-CPL peers. So the reason for this is that they complete at higher rates. They persist and complete at higher rates. So while they may receive credit for some introductory level courses, on the back end, they stick around and finish their degrees. And because they do that, it ends up generating more revenue for institutions and also increases the demand of faculty members. And frankly, in general, these individuals have more interaction with faculty members than those who do not. There's also a few other benefits around revenue. what we found is that, especially in a lot of different states, credit for prior learning can be a very substantial draw for enrollment of new students. Individuals say that it makes a program far more attractive to them. So obviously, you're going to get more revenue from a student who is brand new that you would not have gotten in the first place. And then lastly, in states like Tennessee that have performance-based funding, sometimes there are premiums on adult learners and completion and progressions. And so if you are in a state like Tennessee, which has those types of performance metrics, credit for prior learning can often trigger them, which leads to increased appropriations revenue as well. So multiple ways to look at it. What I will also say is that is not a revenue generating is the fees around credit for prior learning. No institution's getting rich off of charging $25 or $30 or $45 or what have you for the assessment of the programs. It's rather on the students and tuition revenue, new recruitments, and appropriations is where most of that revenue will come from.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And then lastly, for institutions that are just beginning to implement PLA or think about starting to implement PLA, what are the best first steps that they should take? And I'm also wondering about best practices that you've seen across Tennessee or nationally that could serve as a model for these institutions.
Sure. A little bit of a shameless plug. I do have a white paper out there called The 4 Stages of Building an Inclusive and Effective Credit for Prior Learning Program. It's on our website, CAEL.org, if you want to look it up. It has some steps that I think are helpful in terms of developing a program. But in brief, I will say sometimes CPL programs frequently exist on paper somewhere in an institution. We recently, as of a couple of weeks ago, co-authored a survey report with ACRO. And what we found is that approximately 82% of all institutions in this country have some type of CPL on the books. Now, whether or not any students are going through it is a totally different story. But it is something that's on the books. So first of all, look and see what you have. And sometimes there is something to work with because credit for prior learning has been around since the 30s and 40s. And so it's usually easier to start with something that you have that someone has worked on at some point and to make adjustments to it. But that being said, the most important thing to start with is to focus on getting leadership support for credit for prior learning. Sometimes there's a desire to start with trainings or policy changes and things like that, but it can be difficult to do if there's not sort of wide engagement. Credit for prior learning is not something you just flip a switch on and it starts operating and you don't have to do anything about it. You need faculty members, you need the registrar's office, you need admissions, you need advisors, you even need the financial aid office. They all need to be doing some role or another to make that program run well. And sometimes that just requires time and effort from individuals to help support the program and make sure it doesn't peter out and that they're advising students and helping students to navigate the system. While it can save students a lot of time and money, a lot of times students get lost in just trying to navigate the process. And so I think the first thing to do in particular is just to help leadership understand how it supports your institution's goals. This is not just another flash in the pan initiative that everyone claims is helpful for students. There's substantial research. As Bianca just asked, it can help revenue, it can help enrollment. There's a lot of other benefits that we see around credit for prior learning. And I think in particular, trying to draw leadership's attention to that and saying, this is what it will do, but it will take an investment to see any return on that, to see any sort of benefit from this, we have to invest in it. And therefore, this is what I need. And so coming in with a plan for what you want to ask leadership, and it does not have to be doing all types of credit for prior learning and all programs all at once. Sometimes you may start in one department or another. Sometimes you may focus on easier to assess situations rather than portfolio assessment, which can take more time. But having a very clear ask and then building from there consistently. Data tracking is also important to know where you started and how it's working and being able to share that. I can talk about research and things like that all the time, but it's much more impactful if you can use your own IR department to pull those sorts of statistics. In terms of good best practices that I have seen, certainly in Tennessee, I know this is a UT presentation, but the University of Memphis does a particularly good job with their credit for prior learning